The gas lamps of Dusty Hollow flickered like weary sentinels against the encroaching night, their amber glow casting elongated shadows across the uneven cobblestone streets. The town, nestled in the arid embrace of the American Southwest, was a patchwork of weathered saloons, dusty mercantiles, and ramshackle boarding houses, where the promise of gold had long since faded into the grit of daily survival. It was September 1887, a time when the frontier's wild edges were beginning to dull under the weight of progress, yet the lawless spirit lingered like smoke from a dying fire. Clara Mason, a young woman of 23 with auburn hair tied back in a practical bun and eyes the color of storm clouds, hurried along the main thoroughfare, her skirts whispering against the dirt. She had spent the day bent over her sewing machine in the back room of Mrs. Hargrove's dress shop, mending hems and stitching lace for the town's more affluent ladies and those whose husbands had struck it rich in the mines or on the cattle trails. The work was steady, if not glamorous, and it kept her from the clutches of poverty that had claimed her parents back east. But tonight, the clock had ticked past 8. And the streets had transformed into a gauntlet of revelry and risk. Clara clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the chill of the desert evening seeping through the thin fabric. The saloon spilled over with the clamor of piano music, boisterous laughter, and the occasional shatter of glass from a brawl. Men in dust-caked boots and wide-brimmed hats lounged against hitching posts, their eyes following her with a mix of curiosity and predation. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, her steps quick and purposeful, aiming for the safety of her boarding house on the outskirts. It was a modest place run by Widow Jenkins, where Clara shared a room with 2 other seamstresses, their lives a quiet counterpoint to the town's raucous heartbeat. But the path home wound through the heart of Dusty Hollow, past the Golden Nugget Saloon and the dimly lit alleys where shadows hid more than just stray cats. As she turned onto Elm Street, a narrower vein off the main drag, the fog began to roll in from the nearby riverbed, a rare mist that turned the air thick and opaque. It muffled the sounds, making the world feel smaller, more intimate, and dangerously enclosed. Clara's heart quickened. She had heard the stories whispered among the women at the shop of drifters and outlaws who preyed on the unwary, of women who vanished into the night only to be found broken or not at all. She quickened her pace, her boots echoing softly. But then, a figure emerged from the fog-shrouded mouth of an alley, stumbling into her path like a specter from a nightmare. He was a burly man, his face flushed and bearded, his clothes reeking of stale whiskey and sweat. His eyes, bloodshot and unfocused, locked onto her with a predatory gleam. "Hey there, pretty thing," he slurred, his voice a gravelly rasp that sent a shiver down her spine. "Where ya headed in such a hurry?" "Night's young." He lurched forward, blocking her way completely. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She tried to sidestep him, murmuring a polite "excuse me," but his hand shot out, grabbing her wrist in a vice-like grip. The pain was immediate, his fingers digging into her flesh like iron bands. "Don't be like that," he growled, pulling her closer. His breath was a foul wave of alcohol and decay, making her stomach churn. Panic surged through her veins, hot and electric. She twisted, trying to wrench free, but he was stronger, his other hand fumbling at her shawl. "Come on, give us a smile," he leered, his face inches from hers. Clara's mind raced, fragments of self-defense advice from her late father flashing through her thoughts: kick, scream, run. But fear paralyzed her voice, turning her cry into choked gasp. The street seemed deserted now, the fog swallowing any potential rescuers. She stomped on his foot, eliciting a grunt of pain, but it only fueled his anger. "You lily," he snarled, shoving her against the rough brick wall of the alley. Pain bloomed in her shoulder, and tears stung her eyes. This couldn't be happening, not here, not to her. She clawed at his arm, nails scraping skin, but he laughed, a wet, ugly sound that echoed in the mist. Then, from the periphery of her vision, a shadow detached itself from the fog. It moved with purpose, silent and swift, like a predator in its element. A man in a long duster coat and a wide-brimmed Stetson hat stepped into the fray. His boots were scuffed from miles of trail, and a revolver hung low on his hip, glinting faintly in the lamplight. "Let her go," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel, the kind of tone that brooked no argument. The drunk blinked, momentarily distracted, his grip loosening just a fraction. "Who the hell are you?" he spat, turning partially toward the intruder while still holding Clara pinned. The cowboy, for that's what he was, every inch the archetype of the wandering gunslinger, didn't repeat himself. In a blur of the motion, he grabbed the drunk by the collar of his filthy shirt, yanking him backward with surprising force. The man stumbled, releasing Clara as he flailed for balance. She slid down the wall, gasping for air, her knees weak. The cowboy followed through, delivering a sharp shove that sent the assailant sprawling into the mud-churned street. The drunk hit the ground hard, cursing profusely, but the cowboy stood over him, one hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Stay down," he warned, his eyes never leaving the prone figure. The drunk groaned, rolling onto his side, but made no move to rise, perhaps sensing the lethal promise in the stranger's stance. Clara pushed herself upright, her hands trembling as she adjusted her shawl. The fog swirled around them, making the scene feel surreal, like a tableau from a dime novel. She looked at her rescuer properly now, a tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes that were a piercing blue, even in the dim light. He wasn't young, perhaps in his mid-30s, with lines etched around his eyes from years under the sun. There was a quiet intensity about him, a man who had seen violence and chosen to wield it sparingly. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, turning to her, his voice softening. She nodded, though her throat was tight with unshed tears. Yes, thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once, then offered his arm. "Best not linger here. Let me walk you home." It wasn't a question, but there was no command in it, were just a practical kindness. Clara hesitated for a heartbeat, her upbringing warring with her instinct for safety. But the drunk was stirring now, muttering threats, and the night felt safer with this stranger than without. She took his arm, her fingers light on the worn leather of his sleeve. They moved away from the alley, the fog parting before them like a curtain. Behind, the drunk's voice faded into incoherence, swallowed by the mist. As they walked, the silence between them was companionable rather than awkward. Clara stole glances at him, noting the way he scanned the streets, always alert, always ready. "I'm Clara," she said finally, needing to fill the void. "Clara Mason." He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture that seemed as natural as breathing. "Eli Kane," he replied. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Mason, though I wish it were under better circumstances." His drawl was slow, laced with the cadence of Texas or perhaps further south. She wondered what brought him to dusty Outlaw, a town that attracted drifters like flies to honey. They passed the Golden Nugget, where piano music tinkled out into the night, accompanied by the whoops of gamblers hitting a lucky streak. Eli's presence seemed to deter any lingering stares. Men who might have catcalled Clara alone now averted their eyes. "You new in town?" she asked, curiosity overriding her shock. He chuckled softly, a sound like distant thunder. "Just passing through. Got some business with the cattle buyers up north, but the trail led me here for a spell." She nodded, imagining the life of a cowboy, endless horizons, campfires under stars, the constant companionship of horse and herd. It was romantic in stories, but she knew the reality: dust storms, rustlers, and the ever-present threat of Indian raids, though those were rarer now. The boarding house loomed ahead, its windows glowing warmly with lantern light. Widow Jenkins would be inside, knitting by the fire, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Clara felt a pang of reluctance as they approached the steps. This stranger had saved her, and now he would vanish back into the night. "This is me," she said, releasing his arm. Eli stopped, his gaze meeting hers. "You take care now, Miss Clara. Lock your doors tight." There was something in his eyes, a flicker of concern, perhaps even interested, that made her cheeks warm. "I will," she promised. "And thank you again, Mr. Kane." "Truly." He touched the brim of his hat once more and turned, his duster swirling as he melted into the fog. Clara watched him go until the mist claimed him entirely. Her heart still pounded, not just from the attack but from the encounter. Who was Eli Kane? A guardian angel or just a man in the right place? She climbed the steps, the door creaking as she entered. Inside, the warmth enveloped her, but the night's events clung like burrs. Widow Jenkins looked up from her rocking chair. "Late night, girl. You look like you've seen a ghost." Clara forced a smile. "Just a long day, ma'am. She didn't elaborate. Some stories were best kept close until morning's light could soften them. Up in her room, shared with the snoring forms of Elsie and Mary, Clara undressed by candlelight, examining the bruises blooming on her wrist. They were ugly, purple fingerprints of violence, but she was alive, unharmed beyond that. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams a jumble of fog, grasping hands, and a blue-eyed cowboy riding to her rescue. When dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Clara rose with the sun. The town stirred below her window, wagons rumbling, shopkeepers opening doors, the distant lowing of cattle in the pens. Dusty Hollow seemed ordinary again, the night's terrors banished by daylight. At the dress shop, Mrs. Hargrove greeted her with a raised eyebrow. "You're pale as milk, Clara." "Rough night." Clara hesitated, then spilled the story in hushed tones while threading her needle. The older woman clucked her tongue. "That sounds like Big Joe Harlana, always drunk, always trouble. Sheriff's too busy with the mine disputes to care about the likes of him." Clara's stomach twisted. "You think he'll come looking?" Mrs. Hargrove shrugged. "Doubt it. Men like that forget by morning. But you be careful." Here, the day dragged on, filled with the rhythmic hum of the sewing machine and the chatter of customers. But Clara's mind wandered to Eli Kane. Was he still in town? What business kept him? By afternoon, curiosity won out. During her lunch break, she slipped out to the mercantile, hoping for gossip. Old Mr. Thompson, behind the counter, was a font of information. "Cowboy, you say?" "Tall fella with a Stetson." "Yeah, saw him at the livery stable this morning." "Said his name's Kane, but buying supplies for the trail." Clara's heart skipped. "Did he say where he's headed?" Thompson scratched his beard. "North, to the railhead in Carson City." "Something about delivering a herd for the Bar X ranch." Back at the shop, Clara pondered this. The Bar X was notoriously owned by Silas Beaumont, a ruthless cattle baron who ruled the region with an iron fist. Rumors swirled of rustling, land grabs, and worse. Was Eli entangled in that web? The thought unsettled her. As evening approached, she resolved to avoid the streets after dark, but fate had other plans. A last-minute order from Mrs. Beaumont herself as Silas's wife kept her late again. "Make it perfect, girl," Mrs. Hargrove warned. "The Beaumonts don't take kindly to mistakes." By the time Clara left, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the fog was creeping in once more. She hurried, but halfway home, footsteps echoed behind her. Heart racing, she glanced back and there was Big Joe Harlan, sober now but no less menacing, his face twisted in recognition. "You," he growled, quickening his pace. "You and that meddling cowboy cost me a night's fun." Clara broke into a run, her breath coming in gasps, but he was gaining. The street was empty, shops shuttered. Then, hoofbeats thundered from a side street. Eli Kane, astride a bay horse, reined in sharply between them. "Back off, Harlan," he said, dismounting in one smooth motion. Harlan snarled. "This ain't your fight, stranger." Eli's hand hovered near his gun. "It is now." The standoff was tense, the air crackling. Harlan lunged, but Eli sidestepped, tripping him into the dirt. This time, Eli pinned him with a boot on his chest. "Next time, I won't be so gentle." Harlan cursed but slunk away when released. Clara, breathless, stared at Eli. "You again?" He smiled faintly. "Seems like fate's got us crossed. Let me see you home proper this time." As they walked, with his horse trailing, conversation flowed easier. Eli spoke of his life. He born in Texas, orphaned young, drifting from ranch to ranch. "The trail's my home," he said, "but sometimes, a town like this makes a man think on settling." Clara shared her story, fleeing a failed farm in Ohio after her parents' death, seeking a new start in the West. "It's harder than I thought," she admitted, "but I'm mackin' to." At the boarding house, they lingered on the steps. "Why help me?" she asked. Eli's eyes softened. "Because the world's got enough darkness." "And you? You remind me of someone I lost long ago." "A sister, perhaps." He didn't elaborate. Instead, he tipped his hat. "Good night, Miss Clara." She watched him ride away, the fog enveloping him like a lover's embrace. The next days blurred into a routine disrupted by Eli's presence. He lingered in town, citing delayed business, but Clara suspected it was for her. They meet for walks, shared meals at the diner. He taught her to shoot a revolver in a secluded meadow, his hand steady on hers. "Just in case," he said. Romance bloomed tentative, like desert flowers after rain. But shadows loom at Harlan's grudge. Beaumont's influence. Whispers reached Clara. Eli was no ordinary cowboy. He was a former lawman, hunted by old enemies. One night, as fog thickened, trouble erupted. Harlan, backed by Beaumont's men, ambushed Eli in the street. Gunfire cracked, and Clara, hearing the shots, rushed out. Eli stood victorious but wounded, blood seeping from his arm. "It's over," he assured her, but she bandaged him in her room, their proximity igniting sparks. "Stay," she whispered. He did, their kiss a promise amid chaos. Yet, the chapter closed with uncertainty. Beaumont summoned Eli, revealing a debt from the past. "Help me with the cattle drive, or your secrets come out." Clara overheard, fear gripping her. As Eli prepared to leave, he vowed return. "Wait for me," he said. She nodded, watching him ride into the fog, the cowboy who had pulled her from danger now taking her heart away.